Welcome everybody, my name's Biro, and I'm extremely happy that we're here. I was looking forward to this for a very long time because it represents something that IFFR should stand for and wants to stand for. It has always been the festival of new filmmakers, new ideas, a lot of independent filmmakers that have to struggle. But it's joyous, it's a joyous occasion, but it's also kind of sad occasion in a way, because when we learned of this story, when we learned of what you just saw and what the incredible person that will speak this afternoon will explain you more about had happened, it represents that even to the very best of us, even to the biggest talents that have had the greatest string of successes and have changed cinema itself through profound writing and directing, who have made films, also encounter problems as all of us mortals do when we try to make a film, all of us aspiring filmmakers do when we try to get our vision realized. High peaks, yes, dark valleys as well. He came from an area here and he told me that our harsh winds required a harsh God. Well, he's encountered many harsh winds, and I hope he will overcome all of them on our behalf. Ladies and gentlemen, please give the warmest round of applause to one of the great masters of cinema, Mr. Paul Schrader.
So this won't be so much the typical master class, which is usually a glorified Q&A, but this will be more of a presentation and about an experience I've had and what I've learned from it and what maybe other people can learn from it. In 2013, I'm really not that old. I was involved in, I wrote and directed a film called Dying of the Light. And it was subsequently taken away from me. And I thought about this a lot and tried to learn from it. And I had made two mistakes. And the first mistake is the obvious one, which is I got involved with people who didn't respect me or, in fact, really respect the movies. This happens a lot, more often than you would think, because directors by nature are alpha creatures, and you assume, you just say, you know, give me the chair, give me the whip, I'll go in the lion's cage, I'll have those lions all sitting upright. That's your personality. That's why you are a director. Well, sometimes the Lions win. And in this case, the Lions won. And I didn't have a final cut. I never had asked for a final cut in my career because coming up with the studio system, you were always sort of dealing with people who had been in the movie business for quite a bit of time, who loved movies, and there would be a push and a pull at the end of production, but you would find some kind of compromise, and the film was usually better for it, not necessarily, but usually, and I didn't mind not having final cut. But then a new breed of people have been coming into film in the last 10, 15 years. And these are not movie people. These are investment people. And the fact, when you talk to them, you realize they don't really know movies very well. And they're not really interested in movies too much per se. But they do have an investment model. And in my case, the investment model was I got Nick Cage. I had to have 5 action sequences. They had a specified running time of 90 to 100 minutes. And and of course I had to come in on budget. And if I did all those things, they would make 17% on their investment. And that's really what they were after. So once I had finished shooting, in fact, I had given them where they wanted to be. And I was less of value to them in post-production. And in fact, one of the producers said to IndieWire that we employed Schrader as a for-hire director, and in post-production, he morphed into an auteur. Since I had written an original script and directed an original script, I sort of assumed that they thought I was an auteur to begin with. But that was not the mindset. So while I was in my 10-week director's cut, the DGA director's cut, I found out that the film had been sold to Grindstone, which is a VOD action genre arm of Lionsgate. And I suspected that this deal was in place all along, and it was part of their model, and that they just didn't want to tell me about it. They didn't want me to know that it wouldn't have a theatrical release. But the numbers crunched better without a theatrical release for them. So I was sort of caught. And to be honest, I was sensing this while I was making it, because these people just really didn't care that much about the film. They just cared about the economic model. And that brings me to, so the film, as said on the crawl, it was completed. They brought in a new editor and said that I could observe but not instruct. And rather than sit in Los Angeles for weeks watching somebody take this film apart, I went back home to New York, whereupon I was told that I had quit. So that was the end of my involvement, and also gave them a perfect excuse not to pay me the deferment money that I had agreed to. But this brings me to the second thing I did wrong, the more interesting one, because we all get involved with people we shouldn't get involved with, which is the creative mistake that I had made. And it's a mistake, it's a kind of generational mistake. I came to storytelling in the 1960s, and even though there were new wave interruptions, storytelling from that period, 60s, 70s, 80s, was pretty conventional. It was really based on almost a 19th century model, the three-act structure. And it was almost a theatrical model. Film had thrown the other arts into the modern age, but it really hadn't gone into the modern age yet itself. It was still acting like an older art form. And I knew the concept of narrative was changing. And I knew that our multitasking, rewired brains was assembling information differently and faster than generations before us. I just really wasn't aware of the degree to which we were changing our perceptive ability when it came to film. And this was manifested in a couple script errors. The first one was someone should have saved me from myself. I did an ending. Well, first I'll tell you what the movie's about. The movie's about a CIA man who has frontotemporal dementia, and he is going insane, and will in a matter of months, not recognize himself. And he finds out that his nemesis, the man who had actually inflicted this damage on him years before and has long been thought dead, is in fact still alive and hiding in Mombasa. But he also has a blood disease, and he's dying too. So now we have a race against the clock. This guy has to track down his nemesis and kill him before he forgets who his nemesis is, and before the nemesis dies on his own. So that was the kind of the premise. So an error I made at the beginning, in order to get the thing financed, at the end, he's losing his brain, but somehow manages to, in an extraordinary, capable way, to subdue his enemies. Now, this was a contradiction, and a smart producer would have said, you know, you've got to address that. I didn't have a smart producer, and that haunted me into the editing room. The other thing that I didn't realize while I was writing was that the film needed to skew to the main character. And as he degenerated, the film should also degenerate stylistically and editorially. And I didn't realize this until after I had finished the film, and I realized that I had thought about it the wrong way. And so now I was coming in after the fact, essentially trying to fix script mistakes with editorial choices. And I was trying very, very aggressively to shake up the editing and make the film kind of disintegrate. But I didn't really have the footage because this was a post facto realization, and so that it wasn't that I didn't. It wasn't so much that I got screwed as I didn't have the answer either. I knew I was wrong. I knew it had to change, but I couldn't figure out how to change it. So that even if I had gotten my way, it still would have been a problem. So it became very simple to just remove me. And they did in the film. Subsequently, the cast and Nick Cage, Anton Yelchin, others denounced the film, and the film was just sort of, dumped. And there were a lot of bad feelings at that time toward me and also from me. And so, my career went on. I've done 2 more films, one which was showed yesterday and again today. But this whole Dying of the Light experience was nagging on me. And then I had an opportunity to do a film called Dog Eat Dog. And it had a wonderful role in it for Nick. And I had been talking to Nick. I said, we can't let this stain stay. Actually, I can't let this stain stay. He's been stained so many times he doesn't care. But I said, I have to get this stain off my shirt. And I said, we got to work together again, and this time we'll do it right. And so I gave him that script, and he said, great, I'll do it. And so then when we set that up, I was able to say, I have to have final cut, because there's no way after I got Nick screwed last time, I'm going to do it to him again. So we won't make this film unless I have final cut. So then now all of a sudden I had it. And the task then was I had an opportunity to back up and think about what I had learned before the filmmaking instead of after. And since I did have final cut, I had all kinds of freedom. And I'm beginning to realize how much filmmaking had changed. And that the concept of the unified style, while desirable for certain films, is not always necessarily desirable. I noticed this when I was watching the films of the Quebecois wunderkind Xavier Dolan. And, he would have a Godard scene, and then he would have a Cassavetes scene, and then he would have a Bertolucci scene, and it all worked together. And audiences we're very good at processing these contradictory elements. The things we used to call mistakes, we now call choices. If a character in a red shirt walks in a room and you cut inside the room and now he has a green shirt on, that used to be called a mistake. Now that's called a choice. And so you can do virtually anything, and they're all just choices. There are no mistakes anymore. So I had to, I wanted to put together a team trying to figure out, Dog Eat Dog was a crime film. Now, how do you make a crime film in 2015? After Scorsese, after Tarantino, after Guy Ritchie, after Wayne Kramer. What does a crime film actually look like now? And so I knew it had to be very transgressive. And I knew I had to get around people who didn't think in the normal movie ways. And so I started asking around. I put together a team of younger talents. It ended up, they're all in their 20s. It ended up being the first solo credit for each of them. And they came from different fields. They came from video games. They came from fashion. And I wanted a group of kids who not only thought outside the box, but in fact didn't even know where the box was. And this was the first time that they were solving these problems. And we met that summer every week at a diner. In fact, Josh, if you can put the picture up. So there we are. That's my team of kids. And basically, we met every week, and you can take it down now. And I just said to them, I have Final Cut. We can do anything. I want to meet every week, bring in examples from film and from architecture, anything. And, if we want to have all the characters wear green hats, we can do that. It's just a question of, we have the freedom. So the only mistake you can make is a mistake of not being bold enough. And so during the course of that 6 weeks, we just sort of hashed this out and just threw out all these ideas. And so now I went into the film with a Gonzo mentality, just thinking, how outrageous can we all be? And the film kept getting more and more outrageous. And it is a polar opposite of First Reformed, which is a aesthetic, contemplative film. And Dog Eat Dog is just a manic, profane, vulgar film. And so now, while I was editing, and the young editor I brought in, who had not made a feature before, but he had been trained by Hank Corwin, who was somewhat of a legendary figure in Hollywood. He was one of the editors on Natural Born Killers. And Hank Corwin is, by nature, a Gonzo editor. If you've seen that film, you understand how radical he is. And Ben Rodriguez, had been working at Hank's company on music videos and commercials and stuff. And he was now cutting Dog Eat Dog. And I was just watching him work. And I said, this is the guy. This is what I didn't know. This is why I couldn't get Dying of the Light together. This is the approach I should have had back then. I should have known this before I wrote that script, and I should have known this in the editing room. And so now I'm thinking about how can I use this lesson. And so I knew the next film, First Reformed. I went to Ben and I said, we don't need your skill set for First Reformed. It's very meat and potatoes. It's all locked off. All your special skills won't do you much good on that film. But I'm going to hire you anyway, because we'll edit that film rather quickly. And on the side, I want you to recut Dying of the Light. And so we were editing the two films more or less at the same time. One which was completely manic, you'll see, and the other which was just locked off, boom, boom, boom. So I then went to Lionsgate, and I said, look, I want to recut Dying of the Light. I'll do this on my own dime. I'll remix it. I'll do music, get the music done, and I'll give it to you. You can do whatever you want with it. You can put it on your website, or you can put it as an extra. And any additional monies that happen will accrue to you. I will take zero money. And Lionsgate thought that was a good offer. And they said, but you have to get permission from the producers, because that's how the deal was structured. Went to the producers said no. Because of all the bad feeling, things I had done, things I had said, and so forth. And so they did not want to offer me this bit of gratification. But I decided to go forward anyway. And I did not, now, because they wouldn't give me permission, I had no access to the original materials. I only had access to 3 DVD cuts and their cut. And I had no clean sound. It was all intermixed and stuff, temp mix. So we decided to come up with an approach to use these limitations to deconstruct and reconstruct the film. And before I get into how we went about doing that, I'm going to show 2 scenes. The first scene, this is the scene where the character gets fired from the CIA because of his behavior. And so the first one you see will be from Dying of the Light, you know, the film that I couldn't take my name off, so my name's on that one too. You know, they just said to me, "We bought your name. What do you mean you can't take it off?" And I was that. You know, you can take it. If they don't let you take your name off a film, you can't. And then the other is the same scene from Dark as I kind of reconfigured it.
What do you propose?
I would like to set up a task force, establish Benir's whereabouts, extract him, and have him return to the United States for trial.
You'd like to set up a task force?
I meant the agency, sir.
Why don't we just let the man die? That is, assuming that your confidential source is correct, and assuming that it does in fact indicate the presence of a man that no one's heard of in 22 years.
Because it is not the policy of this agency, nor is it the policy of this government, to allow the man who's responsible for at least 17 kidnappings, a dozen executions, and the bombing of a tourist bus, some of whom were children, by the way, to go free simply because he's sick.
Mary Sindin Sanjar. Come in. This is Dr. Sanjar. He's with the Office of Medical Services. Please, Evan, sit. Dr. Sanjar was speaking at UPenn Hospital, a conference on service-related diseases. Did you really think you could travel 150 miles, make 3 visits to a neurological clinic under a false identity, give blood, leave fingerprints, and not have us find out about it?
Dr. Claiborne forwarded your medical records.
You don't have to worry about payment or privacy or quality of care. CIA takes care of its own.
The OMS has a state-of-the-art facility, in addition to which we coordinate our efforts with AFRH here in Washington.
And we'd like to make this as easy as possible for you. I've been speaking to the DDO. We'll have a retirement dinner, the press, everyone will come. Heck, even the president will be there.
Benir. What about Benir?
Mohammed Benir is dead, Lake. Has been for 22 years.
We interviewed your departmental associates. We're concerned about these mood swings you've been suffering. The unpredictability of behavior.
Benir, damn it!
There is a concern that you could become a liability to the agency.
Fuck you.
Calm down.
I'm a liability? You fucked this up just like you fucked up everything else. Fucked up Iran-Contra, fucked up Ames, fucked up 9/11, fucked up WMD, Afghanistan, Iraq, Benghazi. Not you yourself, of course, no. No, you're just the latest in a long line of fuck-ups who turned this agency into a cesspool of politics and special interests on behalf of the weapons makers and the surveillance industry who get richer while we get weaker.
Mr. Lake.
I've forgotten more about this agency than you'll ever know. Who put you up to this, huh? Who's got their hand in your pocket now? I've seen a million people like you. A million people. You got your head so far up Obama's ass, you can't see anything except the shit anymore. Shame on you. Shame on you.
Agent Lake,
Yes?
the directors asked us to collect your security badge.
Please stand, sir.
Sir, we've been instructed to escort you out of the facility.
Placed items you would like to take here on the desk for inspection, sir.
You want to check my aftershave?
There's no need to be snippy, sir.
I've got my files. Here, take them. Want the warrants? Here's a couple of them for you. This is what they give to assholes like me who give their lives for their country, who have values. Get someone else to give your goddamn lecture. I resign!
What do you propose?
I would like to set up a task force, establish Benir's whereabouts, extract him, and have him return to the United States for trial.
You would like to set up a task force.
I meant the agency, sir.
Why don't we just let the man die? That is, assuming that your confidential source is correct.
Because it is not the policy of this agency, nor is it the policy of this government, to allow the man who is responsible for at least 17 kidnappings, a dozen executions, and the bombing of a tourist bus to go free, simply because he's sick.
Mary, send in Sanjar. Come in. This is Dr. Sanjar. He's with the Office of Medical Services. Please, Evan, sit. Dr. Sanjar was speaking at UPenn Hospital, a conference on service-related diseases. Did you really think you could travel 150 miles, make 3 visits to a neurological clinic under a false identity, give blood, leave fingerprints, and not have us find out about it?
Dr. Claiborne forwarded your medical records.
You don't have to worry about payment or privacy or quality of care. CIA takes care of its own.
The OMS is a state-of-the-art facility, in addition to which we coordinate our efforts with AFRH here in Washington.
And we'd like to make this as easy as possible for you. I've been speaking to the DDO. We'll have a retirement dinner. The press, everyone will come. Heck, even the president will be there.
Benir. What about Benir?
Mohammed Benir is dead, Lake.
I didn't see Benir's head.
We interviewed your departmental associates. We are concerned about these mood swings you've been suffering, the unpredictability of behavior.
Fuck you.
Calm down.
Benir, damn it.
There's a concern that you could become a liability to the agency.
I'm a liability? Fuck you.
Calm down.
You fucked this up just like you fucked up everything else. This is what they give to assholes like me who give their lives for their country. Fucked up Iran-Contra, fucked up Ames, fucked up 9/11, fucked up WMD, Afghanistan, Iraq, Benghazi. Not you yourself, of course, no. No, you're just the latest in a long line of fuck-ups who've turned this agency into a cesspool of politics and special interests on behalf of the weapons makers and the surveillance industry who get richer while we get weaker.
Mr. Lake.
Who put you up to this, huh? Who's got their hand in your pocket now? You got your head so far up Obama's ass, you can't see anything except the shit anymore. Shame on you. Shame on you.
I mean, I don't want to, claim that I saved that film. I mean, the restructured film is just as commercially problematic as the original. But it did give me an opportunity to rethink my visual world, in the context of post-production, because I began as a screenwriter, so you think of these stories as scenes rather than compounded imagery. And now I started to have to say, I want to think about it in terms of imagery. And that's one of the lessons I learned. And so how was Ben doing this? I took an iPhone video of him in the editing room, which I'm going to show. But since we didn't have any of the original materials, we'd show one of the cuts on a flat screen. And then he would take out his phone, you can see him doing this, and changing the size, changing the focus, he would refilm it. And he would maybe do 4 or 5 passes that way, totally intuitively, not really calculated at all. Then we could feed those refilmed scenes into the computer so that they could run simultaneously, and we could then cut between variations of them, and then we could add coloration, sound, defocusing, whatever. So you see the second one there, you're seeing all that jittery handheld stuff. That's simply an iPhone refilming a monitor. And so I'm going to put up the clip of Ben doing this.
There's something stuck in there. You have to be honest. It won't flush. You pulled the chain. I pulled the chain. There's something stuck in there. You have to be honest. Your condition is far worse than I imagined. The long-term chances for survival are not good. Neither are the short-term chances. In fact, they are quite hopeless. It's because I'm not a doctor. My name isn't Julian Cornell, and your name isn't Ellie Hariri. Your name is Mohammed Veneer. delicious. Heaven-like. Boy, you'll be all right. What did you do with Bucket?
So, I find myself, that's what Ben is doing there. That's not how a writer really thinks. A writer thinks of story blocks and scenes, and Ben is just thinking of imagery. And so at the age of 70, I found myself having to learn a lesson that I should have learned 50 years before in terms of what it really means to assemble images rather than use narrative blocks. So we did that. The end product was 73 minutes long. The film was originally was 90 minutes. And as I said a moment ago, that this masterclass isn't really about how I got screwed or how I saved the film. It's about how you can learn from something that it isn't necessarily stuff that they do to you. It's also stuff you do to you, and give myself a chance to reinvent. So then, out of Dying of the Light came Dog Eat Dog, which is a kind of Gonzo crazy film. And then out of Dog Eat Dog came from First Reformed, which is the opposite film. And I just was able to get the courage to do more and more different stuff by learning from my mistakes and so forth. So I'm going to show another comparison scene, and then I'm going to show the last 15 minutes. So there's a scene here. The story begins in Washington, D.C. It moves to Bucharest, where the doctor lives that's been treating him via couriers, and then it moves on to Mombasa. So this is a scene in a restaurant in Bucharest with Irene Jacob, where they're talking about how to approach the doctor.
Professor Dr. Julian Cornell. Nothing particularly stands out about him. Keeps a low profile, community service, sits on a couple of boards.
What about his wife?
And Gina, they met through an aid program.
Where?
Mombasa.
Sir? What?
This is a non-smoking section.
Let me just check something. Yep, I am in Romania. Are you out of your fucking mind? This whole country is a smoking section.
Evan.
Okay.
Sir, there is a smoking area upstairs.
I'm putting it out. Jesus!
Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
I'm sorry, Michelle. I'm sorry about that. It's the jet lag. It's got me turned around.
Sorry.
What's the best way to approach Dr. Cornell?
In his office, during business hours, closed door with colleagues nearby. I've prepared an official cover. You'll be my American colleagues.
Okay.
How did you and Michelle meet, if I'm not being too forward?
No, it's not too forward. Just wasn't particularly glamorous.
How did you and Evan meet? That's more interesting.
I was a non-official covert op in Cairo, and I lost an asset. the son of a cabinet minister, my fuck up, ugly political situation. The agency just stepped back. Then Evan Lake showed up. 2 days later, I was on a plane back to Washington.
They just needed to be reminded we take care of our own. I was a believer then.
You still have it, don't you?
What?
You know what I'm talking about. Show him, Evan.
Yeah, I caught a bullet when I was extracted.
He offered once to have that bullet put in a ring. If I'd agreed to wear it on my finger. I bet you didn't know he was such a romantic.
I've got to get back to the room. This flight really took it out of me. See you later.
Did you have to say that?
Did I embarrass you?
You couldn't embarrass me.
Professor Dr. Julian Cornell. Nothing particularly stands out about him. Keeps a low profile, community service, sits on a couple boards.
The young wife?
And Gina, they met through an aid program.
Where?
Mombasa.
Sir? What? This is a non-smoking section.
Yeah, let me just check something. Yeah, I am in Romania. Are you out of your fucking mind? This whole country is a smoking section.
There is a smoking area upstairs.
Since when did you start having non-smoking sections? Smoking is mandatory here. Look. See? Okay. I'm putting it out. Jesus!
Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
I'm sorry, Michelle. I'm sorry about that. It's the jet lag. It's got me turned around.
Sorry.
What's the best way to approach Dr. Cornell?
In his office, during business hours. Closed door with colleagues nearby. I've prepared an official cover. Not tomorrow, the day after.
Okay.
I'll be ready by then.
How did you and Michelle meet, if I'm not being too forward?
Well, it's not too forward. It's just wasn't particularly glamorous.
How did you and Evan meet? That's more interesting.
I lost an asset. The agency just stepped back. Then Evan Lake showed up. 2 days later, I was on a plane back to Washington.
They just needed to be reminded we take care of our own. I was a believer in that.
I've got to get back to the room. This flight really took it out of me. I'll see you later.
Did you have to say that?
Did I embarrass you?
No. You couldn't embarrass me.
When are you going to do it?
Do what?
Lean over the table and kiss me.
So, yeah, our whole business is, becoming more and more post-driven. Now that we can shoot in 6K or even 8K, you can reframe a movie afterward. The Revenant was largely reframed afterward. You can you know, change the lighting afterward in post. So more and more of the film business is happening in post-production. When I first began, the cinematographer would do color correction for maybe three days, and you would shoot for 10 to 12 weeks. Today, you shoot 4 to 5 weeks, and color correction, or the DI, takes 3 or 4 weeks. So you can see how the work has shifted into the area of post. So that is really what I had to say. I just thought it was a very good kind of learning experience. Then I had to figure out, you know, how I was going to end this version of it. And so here this last scene is a scene that Ben was working on when we showed that clip earlier, which is the scene where he's in Mombasa, then he goes over to Banir's house and with the idea of killing him. And after that, I'll take some questions.
Banir's assistant, Mabu, is going to pick me up tomorrow at 4 p.m.
I went shopping at the market. Jericho 941 and a Glock.
How much?
2,000 euros.
You got took.
Well, we got euros to spare.
You smell something?
Mombasa?
The other night, when we were in the park in Bucharest, I touched your jacket. You were wearing this blue, like, canvas jacket, but when I touched it, it felt just like dog fur. Isn't it strange when you can't even trust your own fingers? And don't ask me how I feel.
I wouldn't think of it.
Grok is gun. No way I'll be able to bring a gun with me tomorrow. Maybe he frisked me today, he'll frisk me again tomorrow.
Well, how do you plan to do it?
It's been so long, I've thought about it so long. I'm not sure. Maybe I'll just let the moment guide me. I've got a syringe of medication. One's quick and painless, the other's a strychnine derivative, excruciating. Takes over an hour. And maybe I'll just get up close to him, slice him, and let his blood wash all over me.
I don't feel comfortable letting you go in there alone.
I'll be all right. I brought a belt blade. I'll be able to get that through, but that's about it.
So that's that then?
Yeah. Milt, thanks for coming along.
No problem, old sport.
If I'm not out in an hour, do whatever you want.
Sometimes Dr. Cornell.
Salam alaikum.
Salam alaikum, Saeed Ali Hariri.
Dr. Cornell, thank you. Thank you for coming. Forgive me for not standing. Mbui, some tea.
Naam, Sheikh.
And those dates.
Mind if I sit?
Oh, please.
Dr. Wangari has provided me your records, your treatment history. Last night I was in contact with several of my colleagues. Thank you. I noticed you were scheduled 3 months ago for a bone marrow transplant, but I found no record of the procedure. Was there a problem with the donor?
It was too dangerous.
No sibling donor was possible, no compatible cousins.
It is risky, but an unrelated donor can be found based on HL, B, and DR histocompatibility. The university hospital can assist in finding such a donor. We have a large database. Should have been done before. It is more dangerous now, but we have no choice. At present, transplantation is the only possible curative therapy.
And it can be done here?
Yes. Excuse me, I am not such a young man. Where is the toilet?
Back and to the left.
So sorry.
Oh, please, please.
There is a problem with the toilet.
Boy.
It won't flush.
You pulled the chain?
I pulled the chain. There's something stuck in there. To be honest, your condition is far worse than I imagined. Your long-term chances for survival are not good. Neither are your short-term chances. In fact, they are quite hopeless. It's because I'm not a doctor. My name isn't Julian Cornell, and your name isn't Ali Hariri. Your name is Mohammed Banir.
Mr. Ruchowski.
Evan Lake.
Where is your backup? Your elite commandos. Oh, you came alone. How did you find me?
Through the request for experimental thalassemia medication to sit behind. Family medical history. Yeah.
So, how are you going to kill me?
I I don't know.
How are you going to keep me? Good.
I don't know. What the hell are you doing here?
Perhaps we can have that conversation that I wanted to have that time years ago. Huh? Perhaps you've read some of my writing.
Mr. Lake, I strongly recommend you put the matter of Mohammed Banir behind you.
I didn't know you were still active.
Yeah, I contribute a number of websites, not under my name. Of course, you are a religious man, Mr. Lake.
No, I'm not religious.
I think you are. America. You see yourself as a religion, America. I've written about this. The American way of life. Have you been to Greeley, Colorado? You know what I'm talking about?
Sayed Qutb went from Cairo to Colorado State College in 1948. Said Greeley was like paradise on earth.
So was Gilia. Decadence, promiscuity, pop music.
Baby, it's cold outside.
It's cold outside.
Baby, don't hold outside. Baby, it's cold.
It's cold the flirting, the mixing of men and women, the disrespect. So, no, he left. Went back to Egypt. The movement was born. Muslim Brotherhood. My father knew him.
No, Nasser executed him.
It's too late. Fundamentalism. The message of the Prophet was social justice. Better schools, better jobs. Mr. Lake, this doesn't just end. Are you still believe it? Still believe? I don't. My faith, it was taken from me. You think I'm playing games with you, Mr. Lake? Huh? You think we are playing games?
My name is Charles.
Well, Muras, Ayatollahs, they get rich. They have their orgies. In prison, they're opponents.
My name is Charles Wachowski. I'm a representative of Spirit Systems.
The only hope for Islam now is Marx. Social justice.
We like the fear. I like the fear. I like the fear.
There are believers. So many. No, the truly dangerous people are the ones who follow orders.
Do you think it made any difference? We are dead!
Do you? Now, what is the name of the source? You're sick too, I see it, your face.
You have a disease of the blood. My disease is in the brain.
What sort of disease?
I'm forgetting things.
Oh, it is a lot to forget.
So, as you can see, Ben and I had a good time. Nick Cage meets Stan Brakhage. And then, of course, we could be, editing that film for the rest of our lives with the, but we did enough of it to, learn what I was trying to do. And ironically, just after I finished this, I'm watching the new Twin Peaks, and we get to episode 8. And all of a sudden, David Lynch is doing the same thing, spinning off into Bruce Conner and Stan Brakhage land. Because I didn't have the rights to any of this, and I'm dealing with very litigious people, I can't screen it. So the workaround is I have a film archive at UCLA and a papers archive at University of Texas in Austin, the Harry Ransom Center. And so I submitted this as part of my papers to UCLA, to Harry Ransom, and then also to Museum of Modern Art in New York. And so if a scholar contacts the Museum of Modern Art or UCLA, they can go there and see this because it's part of my papers in the same way that I submit my correspondence and you can go and read my correspondence. They're not allowed to show it publicly. They're not allowed to charge for it, but it can be used as in a teaching and scholarly context. So that's what we're doing now. We're using it in a teaching context. So that's the end of the dark portion. So we still have some time, and willing to talk about most anything. I have worn a number of hats over the years, from critic to raising money to writing, directing, whatnot, teaching. I'm about to go on a lecture tour for, 45 years ago I wrote a book called Transcendental Style in Film. And I've updated that book. That book sort of ended with Tarkovsky, and I've updated it now from Tarkovsky through Deleuze and Bellatar and up to Wayne Bing. And so I'm going to be speaking at a number of seminaries in the U.S. in the context of the new edition of the book, which comes out in May, and then First Reformed, which comes out about the same time. And so I'm back, going full circle back to my seminary training. All right. I don't know how they're going to. I was told that somebody would be around with a microphone. Maybe we should bring the house lights up a little bit. It's kind of hard to see anybody.
Raise hands, please. Any questions?
Hello, I am the person with the first question.
Yeah, I have no idea where you are.
You once said that one of your most well-known characters, Travis Bickle, from A Taxi Driver, in his 20s he was a taxi driver. In his 30s he was a gigolo, and in his 40s he was a drug dealer. And what would he be doing now?
Well, in his 50s he's a minister. And it's the same character in First Reformed, I don't know where he goes after that, if he goes anywhere. But First Reformed was a very nice rounding off piece, because I'd written about spiritual films, but I never thought I would make one. I was just too interested in action and empathy and sexuality and violence. These are not in the Transcendental Toolkit. And so I never thought I would make a film like that, even though I liked them. But then a few years ago, I was giving an award to Pavel Pawlowski for Ida. And we got to talking. And he so inspired me at the end of it. I said, it's time for you. It's time for you to write one of these. And so I did. And then I used component parts from films I had liked. The main character is Country Priest. The setting is Winter Light. The ending is from Ordette. The levitation scene is from Sacrifice. And it's all tied together, bound together by Taxi Driver. And the editor, when I was in the editing room, he said to me, there's a lot of, Ben here, he said, there's a lot of Taxi Driver in this movie. I said, yeah, there is. I really wasn't aware that there is so much of it in there. But so it was been a very nice rounding off part to combine my first script with my book and round it all off into contemporary context.
Yes. Hello. Thanks for this opportunity. I like you. There were before two.
Which way am I looking?
Here. Sorry. Sorry. Thanks again. And I like you to tell there were before at least two chances where the production was special, as to say. One was the prequel of Exorcist that was remade. And the other one is the Canyons, where the experience was completely different, and I like to talk about them.
Well, as I say, sometimes the lions win, and I jumped into the Exorcist prequel because John Frankenheimer died, and they were almost ready to go, and I just didn't do it well enough, foolishly, the financier replaced me and reshot the whole movie with Renee. Renee's are there. Harlan. I sort of put the hymn stitch together my version of it. It doesn't really work. But a far more interesting situation was Canyons, because I was going to do something with Bret Easton Ellis, who's a friend, and I fell through, and we were talking, and I was saying, Bret, they always change your material, they're always censoring you, and I've run into these problems. Now we have this new technology. You write it, I'll direct it, we'll pay for it ourselves. And so that's how we began. And so Bret and I and a producer friend put in $30,000 each, so that was $90,000. And then we got $175 from Kickstarter, from the first Kickstarter film. And then we got about $250 in deferments. And we cast off the net. And I was able to hire people that the studios normally wouldn't let me hire. Lindsay Lohan and her last film, because she's not insurable, so I couldn't have hired her. And James Dean, who is a porn star who Bret was crazy about. I thought that was interesting. And so we made that film, and we sold it to IFC, and everybody made money. It turned out it was a great kind of experience to do once. Afterward, I said, I'm really glad I did this, but stop me if I ever try to do it again. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work going the crowdfunding route. A lot more. I'm sure if any of you have tried it, you realize how difficult it is. But in fact, there was a delicious article written, cover story of the New York Sunday Times magazine. It was written at the time. The article was called, "Here's What Happens When You Hire Lindsay Lohan for Your Movie." And it's a very, very entertaining article, and strangely enough, mostly accurate. But it is a very entertaining read if you want to know more about that production.
Hi. Yeah, you talked about three-arc structure still being very dominant. It's still dominant in all textbooks. Can you elaborate on if it has changed and if it must change? Or?
Yeah, I don't think the three-act structure, it feels just so tired. You know, you can hear those creaking gears going into effect. I mean, one of the nice death knolls of one of the reasons the three-act structure has died is because we now have multi-episodic structure, which is a different structure altogether. It allows you to be much more tangential. The mechanics of the plot are not so obvious. You're not so clearly, oh, this is going to set up this and this is going to set up this. Because when you're doing episodic, you can be tangential and you can sort of drift off for an episode or a scene. And also, you don't put the climax in the end because you want them, you're doing a serial and you want people to come back the next week. So you put the climax in the middle and then the setup for the next episode at the end. So you are... one of the, I think, exhilaration of long format TV is breaking free of the chains of that whole three-act structure, which feels to me more and more tired. I mean, I'm not, you know, it's still in use, it's never going to go away, but the idea that it has to be, you know, this is this Robert McKee idea. And it never made sense to me, and now it's clearly not very potent anymore.
Hi. Really excited for the re-release of Transcendental Film Style, and I'm just wondering if you could comment on transcendence in the context of digital media. It's really easy to see transcendence in Ozu's Late Autumn, but I'm wondering if you could make a comment about a 15-second Facebook video.
Well, I mean, I don't think the digital, it's the same kinds of techniques, whether you're using film or digital. And it's all about withholding, you know. When you're doing a quiet film, you have to pull the viewer into you. And so you start withholding things. You're withholding cuts. You know, you're delaying your cuts, you're withholding music, you're withholding empathetic performance, you're doing longer takes that don't tell the viewer what he should be looking at right now. And bit by bit, there are about a dozen or so of these withholding techniques that slow cinema and spiritual directors use, and they don't all use the same ones in the same ratio. So, you know, if you look at a Bresson or a Bellatar or an Angelopoulos or a Salon, you know, they're all different, but they're using the same basic tools. And what happens when you start leaning away from the viewer can do one of two things, which is either start leaning toward you because he's interested, or he can get up and leave. And so that's the high wire act of these kind of films, is how do you make the viewer come toward you without boring him so much that he is turned off, or she is turned off. So well, what I discovered, and I don't want to go into that whole thing about the book, but what I really discovered was that it all came out of neorealism, and it's, you know, the big thing that happened was Tarkovsky and Gilles Deleuze, and explaining the whole concept of duration. What happens when nothing happens? How does duration, the Bergsonian sense of time, act upon an image? If you know, in normal life, you know, somebody leaves a room and you drop the splice just before the door closes, because that's sort of what you do in real life. As soon as somebody leaves the room, you find something else to look at. So Bresson starts by, no, he leaves the room, let's take it 1, 2, 3 beats, boom, then cut. Now you just sit there looking at the door. That's dead time. Tip more. Well, what's happening during that dead time? You're looking at something you wouldn't look at in real life. Something is happening there. Now, what happens if I hold that for 10 seconds? Then what's happening? What happens if I hold it for a minute? And then you start to play sound. But then you start making your own movie. And that's how these techniques work. So, you know, so like if I did a tableau, and, you know, a guy comes up in the top corner of the screen, and he starts walking across the screen. Now, if you've watched a lot of slow movies, and if you're in Rotterdam, you certainly have, you know that director is not going to cut till that guy gets all the way across. And then he'll probably even hold after he leaves. So now, what do? You start looking around. Or you hear a car. Oh, there's a car coming. Oh, but then the car goes away. But there's goats. Oh, while you were looking for that car, one of the goats left. Oh, and the clouds have changed. And here he is now. He's about in the middle of the screen. And here comes the car again. Well, what's happening? You are making a movie. This is a movie that the director is making you create, and that he doesn't necessarily fully control. And it's making you, so slow cinema, in fact, makes a viewer more active, whereas regular cinema makes a viewer more passive. Regular cinema is, you know, so desperate for love and attention. It grabs you by the lapels and says, you know, love me, love me, love me. Here's some beautiful people. Here's some action. Here's some violence. And here's a whole lot of music to tell you exactly how to feel all the time. And you don't have to work much. You just sit there and, you know, let them put on their show. When the movies start going the other direction, then you have to decide what is your investment in the show, what should be my emotion. So like when the new Romanian cinema, like 432, you know, the two girls are sitting there, one on either side of the room. They're talking about getting an abortion. And normally, boom, you would come in for the coverage. Only he's not coming in for the coverage. He's just holding the master. So that means you have to decide which person is more interesting to you at this moment. Is the person talking more interesting, or is the person who is listening more interesting? Well, normally a director and an editor makes that choice for you. When he doesn't make that choice for you, then you have to start making the choice for yourself. And so that's how you pull people in. But of course, it's a very delicate process because it's also how you turn them off.
Thanks. Thank you for showing bits of dark. I was wondering if you want to work more with imagery and less with narrative blocks, how do you incorporate that in writing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm writing something. I'm working on a script now, which is a kind of picture puzzle script. It's like if you take you have a vase and you drop it, and there's pieces all over. Then you have to pick up the pieces one by one and assemble them in some pattern. And that's why those scripts are so hard to write and read, because they don't flow. And the first thing you learn as a screenwriter is catch the viewer. You know, somebody's going to take home 12 scripts this weekend. They're going to start each one of them, but they're only going to get through one or two. Yours has to be the one they get through. So you have to, you know, catch them with your tail. Well, if you're doing all this intercutting about this image overlaps, this image overlaps, you lose them. So, you know, I'm trying to find a way to both involve the intricacy of the assemblage method, and of course the simple narrative power of a good story. And you know, and then I suppose what you should do, what maybe I should have done with Die Another Light, is write one script for them to buy, and then have a second script of the film you actually want to do. But then, of course, they'll catch you that way, too. About it.
Tell us about your review of Easy Rider.
When I was a film critic, I was It was a critic in Los Angeles, the LA Free Press. It's the underground magazine, about 100,000 in circulation. And I lost that job, as I lost many. But in this case, I penned Easy Rider. And this is 1968, 69. And I'm in the screening room, and there's Dennis Hopper, Peter Fonda, Tommy Smothers there, and me and another underground critic. I thought, oh boy, this is going to be heavy. And sure enough, I get back, and everybody at the paper has seen it already, and this is going to be a big phenomenon. And so I went to the editor, and I said, look, I know everybody's crazy about Easy Rider. I know all those kids with ponytails smoking dope in the floor below us have seen this already. But I don't like it, and I'm going to attack it. But you should do a double truck. I'll do the con, bring on somebody to do the pro, do them side by side. And he said, no. We are the Los Angeles Free Press. We stand by our critics. I went, but please don't stand by me. But so I worked a long time on that review, and sure enough, when it came out, the publisher called the editor in and said, why are we panning Easy Rider? And the editor said, we are the Free Press. We stand by our critics. So they fired the editor and me. Well, thank you.